A gold wedding band sat at the bottom of the trash can, half buried under last night's coffee grounds. That's when I knew it was over. Not suspected. Not wondered. Knew. I stood there for a long minute looking at it. The simple gold band I'd put on Celeste's finger 10 years ago, back when I still believed in things like lifelong promises. Now it sat there like a discarded coin, worthless. I exhaled through my nose, steadying myself, then reached in, plucked it out, and wiped it off with a paper towel. No point in leaving a mess. My name is Frank Collier. I'm 61 years old, spent 30 of those years in the Army. 3 tours in the Middle East. Came out with a chest full of medals, knees that remind me of every jump I ever took, and a head full of memories I don't talk about. I like things in order. I wake up at 0500, make my bed so tight you could bounce a quarter off it, and keep my boots polished even though I don't wear them much anymore. Civilian life doesn't come easy to me, but I get by. Or I did until now. I rolled the ring between my fingers. It felt heavier than it should. I'd known something was off for weeks, hell, maybe months. The little things. Celeste turning her phone screen away when I walked into the room. The sudden interest in girls' trips when she'd never been much for traveling before. A different kind of distance, one I couldn't bridge. I chalked it up to the age gap. I wasn't the same man she married, and maybe she wasn't the same woman. But this wasn't growing apart. This was betrayal. The front door clicked open. I set the ring on the counter and turned just as Celeste walked in, dressed in one of those trendy outfits that looked like it was meant more for a vacation than a trip to the grocery store. Sunglasses still on, hair done up just right. She looked at me, then at the ring on the counter, and her whole body went stiff for half a second before she caught herself. I crossed my arms. Lost something? She didn't answer right away. Took her time setting her bag down, slipping off her sunglasses. A deep breath. Frank. I cut her off. Just tell me how long. Her lips parted like she was about to deny it. Then she saw my face. She knew better. Her shoulders dropped and she let out a breath that sounded more annoyed than ashamed. A few months. I nodded, jaw tight. Who? It doesn't matter. It does to me. She looked away out the window like she was considering her options. His name is Ethan. I let that settle in, pressing my fingers into my arms to keep my hands from balling into fists. I didn't recognize the name. Where'd you meet him? She hesitated, then gave a small shrug. That trip to Cancun. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Cancun. Right? You and the girls. Her eyes flicked to me, defensive now. Frank, I never meant for this to happen. It just. Spare me, I snapped. You never meant for it, but here we are. What, was I supposed to stay so damn predictable that you wouldn't get bored? That's not fair. I leaned against the counter, staring her down. Fair? I gestured to the ring. You threw this in the trash. That's fair. She opened her mouth, then shut it. Shifted her weight, arms crossing. I don't know what you want me to say. I studied her, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. She didn't look sorry. Not really. Maybe sorry she got caught. Sorry for the inconvenience. But not sorry for what she'd done. I should have felt something, anger, sadness, regret. Instead, there was just a cold certainty settling in my chest. I straightened. You want out? She swallowed. I think so. Good, I said, voice flat. Because you're getting it. Her brows pulled together like she didn't expect me to take control of this. Like she thought I'd fight, beg, try to salvage what she'd already burned. She'd forgotten who she was married to. I turned, walked to the garage, and grabbed a duffel bag. Came back, tossed it at her feet. Start packing. She blinked. Frank. You made your choice. I'm making mine. I stepped forward, just close enough that she had to tilt her chin up. You want excitement? Adventure? Fine. You go live that life. But you don't get to come back when it falls apart. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Just picked up the bag and walked past me toward the bedroom. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty doorway, then exhaled slow. My hands flexed at my sides. My heart beat steady. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I watched Celeste disappear down the hall, heard the closet door open, the soft shuffle of hangers. She wasn't crying. No apologies, no last-minute change of heart. Just packing. I should have been angry, should have felt something other than this cold, steady focus, but all I could think about was the next step. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and scrolled through my contacts. Found the name I needed and hit call. The line rang twice before a deep, gravelly voice answered. Yeah? It's me, I said. I need to see you. There was a pause. Then, now. Yeah. Now. Another pause, then a grunt. Miller's in 10. The line went dead. I pocketed the phone and grabbed my keys from the counter. On my way out, I stopped at the doorway to the bedroom. Celeste stood at the dresser, folding clothes like this was just another trip. She didn't even look up. I almost said something, almost asked if she'd really thought this through, but stopped myself. It didn't matter. She'd made her choice. I walked out, locked the door behind me, and got in the truck. The drive to Miller's bar was short, maybe 10 minutes, but I barely registered the traffic. My mind was already working ahead, turning over the pieces. I knew what I had to do. I just needed to do it right. Miller's was a hole-in-the-wall joint, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and the jukebox still played old country songs. I pushed through the door and spotted Mike Henderson in the back booth. He was exactly where I knew he'd be, beer in one hand, other hand resting on the table like a coiled spring. Big guy, broad, still built like the army never left him. A faded tattoo peeked out from under his sleeve. He looked up when I slid into the booth. That bad? Worse. He took a sip of his beer, eyes on me. Tell me. I leaned back, rolling my shoulders. She's been screwing some guy named Ethan. Met him on one of those girls' trips. Mike exhaled through his nose. You sure? Found the wedding ring in the trash. She admitted it. He shook his head, muttering something under his breath. Damn shame. Thought she had more sense. I signaled the waitress for a whiskey neat. Yeah, well, sense isn't the problem. She just got bored. Mike studied me for a long second. You gonna lose your head over this? I let out a short laugh. You know me better than that. His lips twitched, almost a smile. Yeah, I do. He took another sip of beer. So what's the play? I glanced around the bar, then leaned in slightly. First thing, I need a good lawyer. One who doesn't mind getting their hands a little dirty. Mike nodded. I know a guy. Second, I need someone to dig into this Ethan bastard. Find out who he is, what he's got to lose. Mike set his beer down, wiping condensation off the glass with one thick finger. You thinking financial or personal? Both, I said. If she wants to walk, fine. But she's not taking a damn thing with her. Mike grunted, approving. That's the way. The waitress set my drink down and I took a slow sip, letting the burn settle. The plan was already forming, clean and precise. No emotion. Just strategy. I'd spent my life leading men into battle, making decisions under pressure. This was no different. Mike tapped his fingers against the table. You need backup? I shook my head. Not yet, but I'll let you know. He nodded, and that was the end of it. No long speeches, no unnecessary words. That's what I liked about Mike. He understood. We finished our drinks in silence, the way old soldiers do. Then I got up, clapped a hand on his shoulder, and walked out into the night. The next step was already waiting. The next morning, I was in my lawyer's office before the coffee had even cooled. The place was sharp, mahogany desk, leather chairs, thick blinds blocking out the Texas sun. The kind of office where things got done, not discussed to death. That's why I was here. Across from me sat Tom Grayson, a man in his late 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. He had the look of someone who'd been through 100 divorce battles and won most of them. He flipped through the file I'd handed him, nodding slightly. So, he said, adjusting his reading glasses. You want to make sure your soon-to-be ex-wife walks away with nothing? I didn't blink. That's the idea. He tapped the folder. You took out a loan on your shared property. Smart. That ties up any assets she might try to grab. As long as we move fast, she won't get a dime. I leaned forward. And if she tries to fight it? Tom smirked. Frank, the only thing she'll fight for is a way out of the hole you just dug. She wants to be with this other guy? Fine. But she's not walking away with your money while she does it. He sat back, studying me. This about revenge or control? Does it matter? He nodded slowly. Not to me. Just need to know how far you want to take this. I looked him in the eye. All the way. Tom's smirk widened. That's what I like to hear. He flipped to another page. I'll start the paperwork. She'll get served by the end of the week. I stood. Keep me posted. Back outside, I took a deep breath of the hot Texas air. One step down. Now it was time to deal with Ethan. Mike had already done some digging. I met him at his garage later that afternoon, the place smelling of oil and old tools. He tossed a folder onto the workbench. Your boy Ethan, he said. Owns a travel agency. Small time. Thinks he's a big shot, though. Lot of debt, lot of bad investments. He's one bad month away from losing his ass. I flipped through the pages. Bank statements, real estate holdings, court records. Mike was thorough. He married? I asked. Mike shook his head. Divorced. Ex-wife took him to the cleaners. He's been trying to climb back ever since. I smirked. And now he thinks Celeste's his ticket? Looks that way. I closed the folder. Let's make sure he figures out he bet on the wrong horse. Mike nodded. You thinking public embarrassment? Legal trouble? Business sabotage? All three, I said. He grinned. I'll get to work. That night, I sat on my porch, whiskey in hand, watching the sky turn dark. The old me, the one fresh out of the service, believing in duty and honor, might have walked away from this. Let Celeste go, let Ethan have his fun. But that version of me died the moment she tossed her ring in the trash. This wasn't about feelings. This was about making sure they paid the price. Mike worked fast. By the time I met him again 2 days later, he already had everything lined up. We sat in his garage, the place stifling with Texas heat and the scent of motor oil. He had his laptop open on the workbench, a cigarette smoldering in the ashtray beside him. He clicked through a few files, then turned the screen toward me. Got everything we need on Ethan, he said. Credit reports, legal history, and a few things he wouldn't want made public. I skimmed through it, my eyes landing on a couple of flagged transactions. What's this? Mike smirked. Looks like your boy's been skimming from his own business. Some creative accounting to cover debts. If the IRS took a closer look, they'd have questions. I leaned back, rubbing my jaw. How hard would it be to make sure they do? Mike stubbed out his cigarette. Couple of anonymous tips, a few well-placed documents sent to the right people. He'll be too busy keeping his business afloat to play sugar daddy to your wife. I nodded. Do it. He cracked his knuckles. Already in motion. That was just the start. Over the next few days, we tightened the noose. The first move was simple: control the narrative. I made sure word spread around town about Celeste's affair. Not loud, not messy. Just enough for the right people to know. Fort Worth wasn't a small town, but it wasn't big either. News traveled fast when you let it. The next hit was financial. Tom filed the divorce paperwork with aggressive terms. Celeste wasn't getting a dime beyond what the court legally required. No assets, no half of my pension, nothing. I played it smart, moved what I needed to ahead of time, legally locking things down. When she got served, I was sitting on the porch watching the sunset with a cold beer. She stormed up the driveway, envelope in hand, her face flushed. What the hell is this, Frank? I didn't even look at her. Looks like divorce papers. This isn't fair, she snapped. You're trying to leave me with nothing. I took a sip of my beer. No, I'm making sure you leave with exactly what you came in with. Her hands clenched around the envelope. I can fight this. I finally turned my head, meeting her eyes. Go ahead. Let's see how that works out. She hesitated just for a second. She knew me well enough to know I wouldn't bluff. I nodded toward the truck. You should go. Lot to think about. She stood there for a moment like she wanted to say something else, then spun on her heel and stalked off. I watched her go, then turned back to the sky. 2 days later, Ethan felt the first squeeze. His travel agency got a surprise audit notice. At the same time, a few of his high-end clients backed out of deals. Nothing illegal, just well-placed whispers. A few concerns raised about his business practices. Enough to shake his foundation. Mike and I sat at Miller's watching the pieces move. He took a slow sip of his beer. You sure you don't want to do something more direct? Guy like him. Wouldn't be hard to make him disappear for a while. I shook my head. This is better. Let him ruin himself. Mike grinned. Cold. I nodded. Efficient. By the end of the week, Celeste was calling me. I didn't answer. She texted. Same result. I let her sit in it. Let her feel what it was like when the world didn't play along. Then, on a Friday night, she showed up at the house. I saw her car pull in, but I didn't get up. Just waited. The doorbell rang once, then twice. I finally opened it, leaning against the frame. She looked different. The confidence was still there, but the edges were fraying. Frank, she started. We need to talk. I crossed my arms. Do we? She exhaled sharply. Look, I know you're angry. Wrong. I cut in. I'm done. That landed. Her jaw tensed. I never wanted to hurt you. I let out a short, humorless laugh. You threw your ring in the trash, Celeste. You didn't care if it hurt me. She swallowed, shifting her weight. Ethan's business is in trouble, she admitted. She hesitated. I don't know what I was thinking. I stared at her for a long second, then shook my head. That's your problem, not mine. She blinked. Frank, come on. We've been together for 10 years. We don't have to end things like this. I held the door open wider. Yeah, we do. She stared at me, searching for something. I kept my face blank. Finally, she exhaled and turned, walking back to her car. She hesitated before getting in. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I didn't answer, just watched her drive away. The door shut with a final click. I locked it behind me. I didn't think about her much after that. Not in the way people might expect. There was no sleepless tossing and turning. No drinking myself into a hole. I had work to do, routines to keep, and a life to live. The way I saw it, she was a problem I had solved. The storm had passed, and all that was left was the cleanup. The fallout played out just like I figured. Ethan's business went belly up faster than I expected. Turns out when a man lives on smoke and mirrors, all it takes is a strong wind to knock everything down. His clients dropped him, his investors backed out, and that little audit turned into a full-blown investigation. From what I heard, he was drowning in legal fees and scrambling to hold on to what little he had left. I didn't need to lift a finger. He did it to himself. Celeste didn't stick around for the fire sale. She tried to ride it out with him, convince herself that they could make it work. But she wasn't built for struggle. The moment the money ran out and the excitement dried up, so did her loyalty. Last I heard, she was staying with a friend, trying to figure out her next move. I didn't care. Instead, I focused on my own life, the things I'd neglected while I was too busy being someone's husband. I spent more time at the Veteran Support Center, talking to the guys who understood what it was like to go from combat to a world that didn't know what to do with you. I took up a few projects around the house, small things that I'd always put off. I went back to the range, kept my skills sharp. One afternoon, I was at the support center when a young guy, maybe mid-20s, sat down across from me. He was lean, buzz cut still fresh, hands fidgeting on the table. Looked like he hadn't figured out how to be a civilian yet. Sir, he said, clearing his throat. I heard you were a ranger. I studied him for a second. Used to be. He nodded. I just got out. Infantry. Afghanistan. I could see it in his eyes. That lost look, the one I recognized because I'd seen it in the mirror. Got a job lined up? I asked. He hesitated. Not really. You got a plan? He shook his head. I leaned back in my chair. You drinking yet? His eyes flicked up, startled. What? I gestured to the guys around us, older vets laughing, drinking coffee, telling stories. Some of them had figured it out. Some were still trying. This life, I said. The one after service. It'll chew you up if you let it. He swallowed. Yeah. You want to talk, you come find me. I pushed back my chair. But you better come with something besides excuses. He nodded, a little more solid in his seat. I walked out into the Texas heat, the sun setting over the parking lot. There was life after war. There was life after betrayal. You just had to know how to take it back. Weeks passed, then months. Life didn't slow down, but it settled. The way I saw it, I had two choices: sit around dwelling on the past or put one foot in front of the other and keep moving. I'd spent my entire life adapting, adjusting to whatever got thrown at me. This was no different. Mike and I still met up at Miller's, same booth in the back, same routine. He slid a fresh beer across the table toward me, leaning back against the worn leather. You hear about Ethan? I took a slow sip, waiting. Got hit with fraud charges, he said. Somebody finally noticed all those shady numbers in his books. He's looking at serious time if they make it stick. I nodded. No kidding. Mike smirked. Hell of a coincidence, huh? I shrugged. World works in funny ways. He chuckled, shaking his head. And Celeste. I glanced out the window, watching a couple of ranch hands load supplies into a truck across the street. Don't know. Don't care. That bad? I turned back to him. Not bad. Just over. Mike studied me for a second, then grunted. Fair enough. A few tables over, A couple of younger guys in faded camo jackets sat talking low, that familiar edge in their voices. I recognized it right away, that feeling of being back but never really back. It was a club you didn't sign up for, but once you were in, you understood. One of them caught me looking, nodded. I nodded back. That was enough. Later that week, I was working in the garage when my phone buzzed. I wiped my hands on a rag and checked the screen. A number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Yeah. A pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in years. Dad? I set the rag down slowly. Luke. Another pause. He cleared his throat. I heard about what happened. I waited. Let him find his words. I should have called sooner, he admitted. Yeah, I said. You should have. Silence. Then quieter, have you been? I exhaled, glancing around the garage. Tools lined up just the way I liked them. The truck parked exactly where it should be. The smell of oil and metal, familiar and steady. I'm good, I said. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. Maybe we could meet up, Luke said. Catch up? I leaned against the workbench, rubbing a hand over my jaw. Yeah, I said finally. I'd like that. We set a time, a place. Nothing big, just lunch. But it was something. After I hung up, I stood there for a long moment, staring at the phone in my hand. Life didn't always go how you planned. Sometimes people betrayed you. Sometimes the things you thought would last didn't. But you adjusted. You adapted. You moved forward. I stepped outside, the afternoon sun warm against my skin. It was a good day. A year later, I was standing outside the diner, hands in my pockets, watching my son pull into the lot. Luke stepped out, taller than I remembered, broader in the shoulders. He had my jawline but his mother's eyes. He looked at me for a second, like he was trying to figure out how this was supposed to go. Hey, he said. Hey. That was it. No dramatic reunion, no long-winded apology for the years lost between us. Just a moment of understanding. We walked inside, took a booth by the window. The waitress came over and Luke ordered coffee. Black. I smirked. Didn't take you for a black coffee guy? He shrugged. Picked it up somewhere along the way. The small talk was awkward at first, but it smoothed out. He told me about his job, construction work, steady hours, good pay. No wife, no kids, but he was thinking about settling down. I listened. Asked the right questions, but never pushed. He was here, and that was enough. Then, after a lull in the conversation, he set his cup down and looked me in the eye. Mom reached out. I didn't react. Just let the words settle. Yeah? He nodded. Wanted to talk. I took a slow sip of my coffee. And? He smirked, shaking his head. Didn't bother. I studied him, the way his jaw tensed just a little, the way he rolled his shoulders like he was shaking something off. That your choice, or just easier? He exhaled, considering. Bit of both. He looked up. She did what she did. You handled it. Don't see the point in dragging it out. I nodded, satisfied. Good. We finished breakfast, and as we walked outside, he hesitated by his truck. We should do this again, he said, casual, like it wasn't a big deal. Yeah, I said. We should. He gave a short nod, climbed in, and pulled away. I watched his taillights disappear down the road, then checked my watch. I had somewhere to be. Miller's was quiet when I walked in, just a few regulars nursing drinks at the bar. Mike was in the back, same spot as always, flipping through a newspaper like it was still 1995. He glanced up. You're late. Didn't know we were on a schedule? He snorted, pushing a beer across the table. Everything settle? I took a sip, let the cold bite hit. Yeah. Ethan? Broke. IRS took him apart. Last I heard, he moved out of state. Mike smirked. And Celeste? I shrugged. Heard she's waiting tables. Drinking more than she should. But not my problem. Mike raised his glass. To natural consequences. I clinked mine against his. To dumbass getting what they deserve. We drank, sitting in comfortable silence. Outside, the Texas sun hung low over the horizon, casting everything in deep gold. I thought about where I was a year ago, staring at that ring in the trash, feeling the weight of a life coming apart. Yeah? Now I had everything I needed. The people who mattered. The peace I'd earned. I wasn't looking back. I was already too far ahead.